So beyond the consent item for minutes, nothing from you guys? Okay. Got any old business?
No.
Not even any old business?
So it should go real quick then.
Hope so. God, I had no idea that was turned on already. Everybody hear me good? Good afternoon, everyone. It's 4:30. I'd like to call this April 16th, 2019 meeting of the Moorhead Public Service Commission to order. I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion is approved. I would also entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda minus item number 4.
Move to approve as amended.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion is approved. Item number 4 is to approve the minutes of the April 2nd, 2019 meeting. Chris, you wanted to point something out for us?
I do. I'd like to note that as much as I can recollect, we did not meet in the city council chambers on Tuesday, April 2nd. So
I wasn't here, so I can't attest.
if we can amend that,
We'll
I'm a
change
happy
that.
camper.
We
Thank
can
you.
fix that. That's a simple edit. And we have video proof. So. I've seen the video.
You've seen the movie.
Yeah, we've seen the movie. So, okay. I'd entertain a motion to approve the corrected minutes for April 2nd, 2019.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Got a motion to second to approve the minutes of April 2nd, 2019. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion is approved. Thank you very much. Item number 6, customers to be heard or recognitions. Customers beyond our professional staff? No. Bill? Any
No, I have no recognitions.
Okay.
No.
Item number 7 is old business. Anyone bringing old business back before? Commissioners? Hearing none. Moving on to item number 8, reports. Starting out, Councilman Gertz, you're up first.
Nothing of any significance to
All
report.
quiet on the home front.
All quiet, yeah.
All right.
That's a good thing.
That is good. Public Service Commission members, what do we have? Nothing special. John?
I think, Steve, you might be helping with this. I think, is it May 6th, there's a tour of the businesses that is being sponsored by either EDA or the city. I read an email, and I apologize for just not remembering the details here for it, but if you have the specifics, maybe you can address that.
Yeah, I know a little bit about it. That Chris had talked to me about, a couple of the businesses, some of them being ushers in the Block E building, and I believe that they will be open for that. So I think they're going to end up there. So
Is that Small Business Week? Is it something to that
I try
effect?
to normally tie that.
Yeah, I think so.
yeah, I think there's 3 or 4 other stops too.
Okay, cool. Thank you, John. Anything else? Other members? Item D, 8D is, item 8C, General Manager. Mr. General Manager, your report.
The only items I have to highlight are already in the written General Manager's report. There is a 2018 Strategic Plan Annual Update that you may want to take a look at, and I'll also attach that when we get to the General Manager's Performance Review. It's some highlights on some strategic items that we've accomplished or are working on back in 2018. Number 2, Laramie River Station tour. That's the power plant that we get. It's a coal-fired power plant we get our power from. And I believe Ralph has been on this tour.
Ralph has.
Yeah, if you ever wanted to see a coal-fired power plant, this is an interesting one. It does fill up, so you got to talk to us soon, but
was
it's
September?
an interesting tour.
September, was it?
This one's August.
August, okay.
Probably not the best month because it'll be warm in Wyoming in August, but
Bring your canteen.
yeah, bring your canteen. Yeah, and then I think item number 6, Moorhead Public Service staff met with the City of Dilworth City Council about the water agreement that we have between us and them. It's a 20-year agreement that has some notice requirements that are going to be due by the end of this year. And so we were providing the City Council with notice. We met with them, and Commissioner Ralph did attend that luncheon meeting with their council a few weeks ago. And the good news is that they didn't actually have to take any action, but they actually took action and passed a resolution saying that they're not going to take any action to exit the agreement.
Oh, okay.
So it'll be extended for another 10 years.
Cool.
So, good work. Chris and Nancy were there as well, so. And the presentation that was provided at that meeting is included in the general manager's attachments. That's all I have.
Bill, generally, what is our procedure for edits and additions to the strategic planning points? If commissioner or
Yep.
member has,
We generally bring those up in the fall
okay?
during the budgeting process.
These
and
would be
then-
edits to your progress report as opposed to the actual
Oh,
elements.
okay.
of the plan.
Edits to the progress report? Well, I mean, you can just bring those up to me and I can edit those.
Okay.
I mean, or we can talk about them during the review, that type of thing.
Okay. I noticed a couple of things I'd like to discuss.
Yep,
So,
yep.
Okay, cool. Steve?
Just on item number 1A1, just like to state that city appreciates any opportunity to collaborate with MPS on ways that we can work together to save the ratepayers and taxpayers money and how to keep downward pressure on our rates. So I appreciate any opportunities. Look forward to looking for future opportunities to work together.
Yep. Yep, we put that one, or I put that one right up front and center so that, it's just a reminder that we are collaborating in a number of areas, and it is for efficiency and effectiveness for both MPS and the city. So, and there are a lot of things that are happening, so we tend not to think about those.
Councilman Gertz points out a paragraph that I even wanted to improve. The very last line about further collaboration. I'd like that to actually be a little bit more detailed in what those extra areas are,
Sure.
as opposed to just kind of the comment that two other areas. So
Well, and if you actually,
I think we could develop that so that we kind of know what you're talking about.
well, if you look at item C, so 1C3 on the top of the second page, commission agreements with the city, there's a big long paragraph, so that provides some more detail.
Okay. I thought maybe that was where we were going, but
Yeah,
we might even refer that way so that you draw the eyes forward into the rest of the plan.
yep. Yeah, I could have referred to it, so that's probably a good idea.
Okay.
I mean, take a look at those and we can, discuss those. It really was meant to be an update of 2018 activities getting ready for the general manager's performance review.
Yep.
So,
Okay. Item D was in the consent agenda, so we'll move on to item number 10. To award the bid for the Southside Water Tower project. I would imagine Bill or Chris?
yep, I think I'll let
Uncle
Chris
Chris up to the
Chris do the
microphone
intro. Yep.
Okay. Chris Knutson, you can identify yourself and let the world know who you are and what you do.
Chris Knudsen, Water Division Manager. So this item is the award bid for Southside Water Tower project. I'll kind of walk through the history on the project just to kind of refresh everybody. Get everything on the same page. So we've been looking at this tower for a long period of time. Actually,
Is it working?
there we go.
Yeah, okay, you're on.
After we purchased the land, we began the design process here in December of 2018 and have been working towards the completion of design since very recently. We just recently approved the specifications for the project and opened bids on April 9th, 2019. So very recently, we received one qualified bid from Landmark Structures, and that bid was in the amount of $3.757 million. We had originally envisioned the project as our total budget for the project is $3.06 million. So we were over budget on that particular item. The tower, we talked a little bit about the design of the tower and some of the key components of the tower. You'll remember we talked about the composite nature of the tower and that we're using concrete forms for the tower. And the forms on the tower, in terms of the height of those forms, is an important element for the design. And so we actually specified a minimum height on those forms, and only 2 of the manufacturers really hit that requirement on that particular piece. We actually had 2 pre-qualified contractors for the project, and there's only about 4 companies that really manufacture and construct these towers nationwide. So we only did get 1 bid for the project, but we had 2 allowable bidders, contractors for the project. In terms of timeline for the project, we had originally envisioned this project to start this summer, May-ish of this year, with completion about July of 2020. Based on some feedback we got from the contractors on the project, we actually extended that timeline to August of 2020. And if you'll remember, we're looking at starting the I-94 process. We originally envisioned that to start immediately after the completion of this project. The tower is actually, having the tower in place before the I-94 project is a critical kind of piece to the puzzle from a hydraulic and fire flow standpoint. So that was our intent. With moving that deadline to August, we're still kind of assessing how we would get that I-94 project done in that time period, but we'd have to really kind of evaluate that. That may change, but that change would ultimately come back to the commission at some point if we did ultimately decide to move I-94 back. But it's a possibility based on the construction schedule and the amount of time that it's going to take to construct this project. Other than that, I have the Landmark is represented tonight by Larry is here, and also Tim Poshin from Apex Engineering is also here to answer any questions we may have on the project. Just to kind of summarize, we're recommending awarding the project tonight, and then we'll have some. Yeah, we're recommending award tonight, and we'll have to kind of deal with I-94 and some of the other issues after the award process tonight.
Chris, before you sit down, why don't we just talk about the string of emails that we were all included in,
Sure.
So that members of the commission can have an opportunity to ask whatever questions they might have about that exchange.
Sure.
We all got drawn into that, so we might as well get that out here right now.
Yeah.
Let's talk it through, and then
Yeah, I'd be happy
then we'll
to.
move on with the approvals.
Yeah. So we had 2 acceptable manufacturers listed in the specifications. One of the manufacturers is Landmark Structures. The other was CBI, also basically called a subdivision of the company called McDermott. Those 2 companies were allowed manufacturers in the specification. It's based on a variety of factors. The company, one of the companies that submitted an unresponsive bid was called Phoenix Tank and Fabricators, and that particular company doesn't meet the specifications that we have outlined. So they had expressed kind of their concern with respect to not being an acceptable manufacturer for the tank project. So those emails are really in reference to just not being an acceptable manufacturer for the project. So they were aware of that requirement prior to bidding. They had asked, why aren't they listed? And we just didn't have them as a listed manufacturer for a variety of reasons, but we can go into the detail on that if you'd like, or, yeah.
Well, it's clear they didn't agree then with the determination that they were unresponsive.
That's correct.
Some fudging about 6 and 7 feet and so on.
Right. And there are some other factors as well. I mean, they just don't have a lot of work history in this area. So, you know, we have a high bar for this project. We want to make sure this is a 50 to 100-year project. And, you know, aesthetics are really important on this project. Those concrete forms, you know, the concrete on the outside of that tank will be visible from a long ways away. You know, the pour height is important in that if you have basically thinner or shorter pour height, you're going to see a lot more of those forms in the structure itself. So form height is critical. The acceptability of the concrete is critical. With those considerations in mind, that's why we were very particular in terms of the manufacturers that were allowed for the project.
Commissioners, any questions, concerns from you? Or Councilman?
So you said you had 2 pre-qualified bidders, and did you receive 3 bids? And then you rejected 2 of them, so
Yep.
you only had 1.
Correct. 2 acceptable manufacturers, yep.
Did the other acceptable manufacturer bid it?
They did not, and it's kind of anecdotal, but I believe they picked up a few water towers prior to our bidding. I believe they were interested in the project, but they just, because they had some success on bids that occurred recently, they just did not submit a bid.
And I got copied on the email that Dave referenced, and it seemed that the 7-foot forms was one of the factors that they were disqualified, and but apparently that contractor said they have 7-foot forms. And how did we respond to that? I didn't see any communication at all from MPS. And my biggest question is, does it open up the city for a potential lawsuit if he feels that he can meet the specifications, but you know, you don't give him an opportunity to? And you know, we've had cases where we've bid projects and we had a very detailed track history of, you know, lack of performance, where you can, in a public bid situation, disqualify somebody as not as a qualified bidder. But, you know, if you haven't had any experience with this other vendor, I mean, because he hasn't done any work in this area, but if he's done a lot of work, you know, did you check some of the other work that he's done on other jobs?
There was a variety of reasons. Tim can speak to some of the correspondence. Tim is Apex's project engineer for this particular project. And so, yeah, Tim did respond to the first initial email, and then with respect to the form height, we didn't respond, but Tim can maybe provide a little insight on that.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Chris. Yeah, we did have some
Tim, would you tell us who you are?
Oh, Tim Poshton with Apex Engineering Group. I'm the project manager on the Southside Water Tower project.
Thank you.
We did have some back and forth with Phoenix Fabricators on a number of different things that they had asked during the bidding process. And you know, to go back to what Chris was talking about, this form height thing, it might sound like not a big deal, but as Chris said, we went into this design with a clear vision that Moorhead Public Service had for what this tower was going to be, the area was going to be. Aesthetics were important. We had public meetings with the people, and so aesthetics were really important. That's why this form height was really important. And to answer your question, while we didn't have any experience with Phoenix, their standard literature that's available publicly indicated that their form height did not meet that 7 to 12 foot foot standard. They also, their standard tower of this size does not meet our required head range. We require a 40-foot head range, basically from the bottom of the water to where the top of the water goes. They don't comply with that either. They had asked during the bidding process if they could be inserted as an acceptable manufacturer, and my response was that we had no intent of altering the acceptable manufacturers. So those are a couple of the big reasons why they were deemed a non-responsive bidder on bid day.
But they submitted a bid. Did you open the bid?
We did not open the bid.
Okay. And I presume he must have been lower, because otherwise he wouldn't have been pursuing it as hard as he has.
I don't know.
Yeah. And I guess my concern is when you're, 23% over budget, if, maybe there's some value engineering things that could be looked at, and, maybe you rebid it, and maybe this other approved bidder would take a different look at it, I don't know, it just seems, I'm probably more concerned that you would open up yourselves up for the city to get into legal action if it's over they were disqualified because they didn't have a 7-foot form, and they say they do have a 7-foot form. So that's my only concern.
Sure.
So I don't know if the city attorney has looked into that or not, so.
My concerns are very similar about receiving one bid that's approximately 25% over, and from my reading of the responses, they asked to have amendments to the proposal, and our response was no, that they're going to have to meet the qualifications. And without opening the bid, we don't know if they have or have not changed their proposal to us. So I agree completely with Steve here that I think we have some issues with only having one bid and not looking at the other potential bid that could have been, because we don't know if they have addressed your concerns in their bid or not at this point, because we didn't look at it. And I believe that is a concern that we need to address somehow. So I'm not comfortable with just approving this bid at this time because of the potential issues that we have.
Anyone else? John Bolger, you reviewed this. You were present for the bid opening.
Correct.
I guess, as a client, but also just the observation, are we legal? Are we moving are we moving forward here with the law on our side, or have we messed up someplace?
My opinion is that we are likely legal. So
Yeah.
Why do I say likely? Because nobody really knows what anybody's going to do in a courtroom.
Sure.
Or the way a judge is going to decide. But in this particular instance, we employed Apex. We went through with Apex what we wanted to accomplish. Apex examined the 4 potential companies. 2 of them were found to be acceptable. The package was available to whoever wanted to bid. The indications are that Phoenix doesn't meet the specs. It wasn't one of the authorized bidders, so we relied on our consultant, our engineering firm on this, to make the decision on what would be acceptable, and they determined that the only acceptable bid was Landmark's bid. I'm comfortable with that. Do I wish that we would have had 2 bids? Yes, I wish we would have had 2 bids. But it didn't happen that way, so now we have to make a decision based on what we do have and what happened. And I know it's not my decision to make, and Steve Gertz is correct in that I can't tell you with certainty whether we would be successful in a lawsuit. I do believe we've got a defensible position, a legally defensible position in awarding the bid in this fashion.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah. I mean,
Chris?
yeah, just so, I mean, just to provide some guidance in terms of the options available for the project moving forward. We're recommending moving forward with award just because of the compressed time frame of the project. However, if the commission felt comfortable with rebidding it, it would be an option. Basically, the rebid would happen. We'd probably bid it June-ish, with maybe construction starting in July with a 2-year construction window. So it would go through July 21.
Yep.
I can say with absolute certainty, we cannot do the I-94 project in 2020
Yep.
if we choose to rebid. So although it's an option, we'll have some financial implications of moving the I-94 project. So we've investigated that a little bit. It is an option.
Yeah.
I think those are the two options we have on the table.
Yeah.
Just want to provide that background.
Well,
Chris, tell me what the timeline is that you're saying if we have to rebid it. You're taking it's going to be 6 months before we can get a bid in?
No, it'd be July before construction would start, just because we'd have to do all the advertisement all over again. The whole process starts over. So we're trying, the intent to award is really to save the 2 months of summer that we'd have for Landmark to begin the process.
But you stated earlier that you were looking at May, and now you're talking if we bidded in July. So that would lead me to believe that the project would then in October of 2020 would be finished, not 2021.
I think, yeah, so to resolve that, so I think one of the feedback items we got was that the construction schedule for this project was too tight. So that's why I would extend it to 2021, to July of 2021. So I wouldn't keep the same construction schedules we have now. We would extend it a little bit past that time. So even if we finished in October of 2020, it doesn't leave any time for I-94 to get completed, because the project, we wouldn't even be able to start till October, and you need 12 weeks to do that project. So that's why it's kind of a little bit of a snowball effect in terms of where we go.
so the painting project would be in 2021.
Correct.
Tower would be finished in the fall of 20.
Well, we'd extend if we rebid it, we're going to extend that timeline, basically make it 2 years from July of this year through July of 21.
I see.
So we're not going to keep the same 1.5-year construction timeline, or roughly 1.5 years.
And Commissioner Regala, that's the value engineering that Steve Gertz was talking about. So if we rebid, we would do, we would talk to the manufacturers and look at what things we could do to maybe lower the bid, and one would be to extend that timeline. So that's what Steve was really referring to.
Yep. I'm still confused here, but because we said earlier that we had a projected time to be done August of 2020. Is that correct?
With this contract, that's correct.
Yes.
So if we rebid, then we would change the schedule altogether.
And that's where you're talking a 2 months difference between this contract, if we accepted this, and a new proposal. But now you're talking about moving the entire project to 2021. And that doesn't click to me that you're talking 2 months delayed and you're talking about entire year for completion.
Yeah.
Let me take that.
Yeah.
It's really what's happening during those final 2 months. And during those final 2 months is when you're painting. And painting has certain temperature requirements, things like that. If you get too far into the fall, into September, that time you just don't have the atmospheric conditions that are favorable for painting that. Okay. And so if you finish up with the actual structure in the fall, then you would move the painting to the next spring.
Okay. All right. Okay. And that's just what we were referring to, is just the painting portion then, to
Correct.
Extend the contract time. Okay.
Right.
It extends the entire project.
Yeah, then the
That's really
I-94
why.
wouldn't start until,
Okay.
maybe summer of 2021.
All right. Okay. All right. Since you're referring to painting, I see that you are recommending one version of the proposed art. I think there needs to be discussion regarding that rationale, that you chose option A or option 1 versus 2, the wraparound.
Sure.
So I think there needs to be discussion as far as if that's the commission's agreement to that as well.
So at the last commission meeting, we approved both alternates as part of the project specifications, but I agree, it's certainly at the commission's discretion at the alternate. I just picked the awarding of the alternate one because it would save approximately $25,000 on the project, and we're over budget on the project. So I mean, that was the intent behind the recommendation, but it's certainly at the commission's discretion.
Chris, what's our potential for a better price if we rebid? What's the availability of builders? Are we running ourselves out of the market? Trying to see the future here a little bit.
Sure. We've had mixed luck, I think, in terms of rebidding. The biggest example I can think of, and it was a cooperative project between the city, MPS, and MnDOT, was the Sims project, which was a couple years back, where that project, I believe, was bid originally in 2015 and then bid again in 2016, and there was some escalation with the rebid. So that's one of the things you always worry about is if you rebid it, you may not garner the cost savings you think you might get, plus you may see some potential escalation. So that's a concern with rebid, but if we rebid, we are going to make some changes, probably based on feedback that we received during the bid process. It's certainly an option, but I don't know if Tim can provide it.
Yeah, and anytime you rebid it, there's no guarantee that it's going to come in better, and I think the Sims is a good example. When the public service water plant was originally built, it was rebid, and there was no cost savings realized there. So, and a lot of it depends on a future that we can't see with these tower contractors, what the rest of the country is doing as far as building tanks of this style, how busy they're going to be at that time, which is why Chris was talking about making the time they have to construct this thing as long as possible, so that they can fit it into the rest of their schedule too.
Chris?
I guess I'm still a little unclear as to what would change in the rebidding process. I haven't heard anything about the standards. Is that what you were talking about, Steve? Was the quality standards?
I'm not a water tower expert. I'll be the
Right,
first
no,
to
but
admit
the engineering, you used a term that I'm not familiar with, value engineering, is that what you
Yeah,
used?
value engineering is when maybe Tim can address that, but
Yeah.
when you go in and look at, maybe using alternative materials.
that's-
And then you can save money by, for the form issue, if it's 7-foot form, and I don't know enough about, I haven't seen any communication, that must be private communication between you guys, so I don't know what type of communication went on between this non-qualified bidder. But if your water tower is, 200 feet tall and you have form 7 foot, maybe you have 2 more joints in it, is that worth, what's the value of that aesthetic worth? So that would be a value engineering. Maybe you end up with a different module, but it saves you money by doing that. But I haven't been involved in any of the design process or anything like that, so I don't know how important that 7-foot module is. So.
Now, my question then is, to you folks then, is will you go back to the drawing board and look at your standards that or are we just throwing this out for rebidding without re-examining the standards that you've set for the tower?
Well, I'll say that there's no reason to rebid it if you're not going to change something.
Right, I think that's my question.
And there's,
Thank you.
to Steve's point about value engineering, there's 2 ways to do value engineering. There's to, get a price for a job, step back and say, okay, what could we potentially change without sacrificing anything structural, operational, maintenance-wise, or aesthetic-wise? What are those things that we could alter or change? There's another way to do value engineering, much like what was done on 20th and 21st, where the bids came in quite a bit over, and it was awarded. And then after that, you work collaboratively with the contractor to find ways to save money during the construction process, and that's a possibility too, much like was done on the underpass project. Beyond looking at the forms, other ways that we've already thought about, this is a deep foundation. Anything that's built vertically in this area needs a deep and solid foundation, and I believe the geotechnical engineer told me that this was some of the worst soil he's seen in the valley here. So it's a challenging foundation that this tower sits upon. I think there's some things we can maybe do with some testing and some tolerances with the foundation that will save a little bit of money. I think extending completion dates, are a very viable option to doing that, and then talking it over with staff and figuring out this whole aesthetic issue and how important that exactly is in this area here, and then talking about the forming systems at that point. So it's a matter of do you want to do the value engineering and rebid it, or do you want to do the value engineering as you're doing it?
I think that it kind of depends on the extent of that value engineering. If you're kind of changing the whole thing, and I want to speak to your issue. You have a good explanation for the different types of value engineering. We just recently bid a project, and it required mandatory 50-hour work weeks because we have just a summer to work on a school renovation. Well, that definitely impacts cost because there's overtime, and if you can extend it out and give them a little bit of that freedom to work it into their schedule, then that helps, because it might, somebody else might look at it and say, hey, now if that works into my schedule, and like Chris pointed out, that because they are awarded, another bidder was awarded a number of towers, that stuff happens on a week-to-week basis depending on when these projects are bid. So, Tim, you have a good explanation of the pros and cons of value engineering, and
at the end of the day, it's a matter of, okay, to rebid this and to push the I-94 tower back, there's a cost there. If we rebid it, we may see a cost savings. Do those two meet somewhere? The extra cost and the potential savings of cost, or potentially no savings in cost with the rebid, because there will be some cost to rebid it and also to push back the I-94 tank.
And so it's if you did rebid it, it'd probably take you a few weeks to.
I'm guessing the whole process to get back to this point here, maybe a couple months.
Yeah.
July, roughly.
So, like Chris said, it'd be sometime in June. So, probably 8 weeks.
Yeah, depending on where the meetings fall and approvals come in.
Well, folks, John?
One more question here, Steve. Recently, there's been some, discussion about who owns property within the utility or the city. And at this point, it appears that there's a suggestion that the city owns this property. If that's the case, does the city have to give a sign-off or an approval since you're putting a fixture on the city's property?
I'm just a construction guy. I'm not an attorney.
Okay. Well, then, Mr. Bolger, since this issue hasn't been resolved yet, but...
Well, I think that there's, we received an opinion from the Attorney General. I understand that MPS is not in agreement with that opinion. So I'm not sure where that stands. So I think it's a subject to interpretation.
Okay. All right.
Now, on this issue, it still has to pass council because it's a competitive bid over $175,000. So we would be at the council meeting next Monday with this issue. So it is good that we're talking about it, and it's nice that Councilmember Gertz is very engaged because it would be nice to have someone that can explain this if we do approve this, which is our recommendation, and take it to the council next Monday night. Now, just to summarize a bit for the commissioners, because staff has been looking at this quite a bit, so you've had an opportunity to talk about this for a half an hour. We've talked about it for quite a bit longer, and we are still recommending that you approve this bid, even though it's 23% higher than what the engineer's estimate was. If you look at the two options that are in front of the commission, option number one, which is to award the bid, which is our recommendation, is very similar to the 21st Street, as Tim mentioned. Tim also mentioned the value engineering that we could do in two different ways. One, you award the bid, and then you work with the contractor to do some of those value engineering. You've got a good contractor. You've got a bid that's higher than what you expected. Virtually the same as what happened with 21st Street. I just heard a presentation at noon today from Bob Zimmerman and Tom Trowbridge that said when they awarded the bid to the contractor for 21st Street, they did value engineering and they were able to acquire about $2 million worth of savings through a variety of methods. Now that's a $52 million project, but they were able to acquire some value engineering with that contractor. We're hoping that we would get some value engineering even if you award that. Again, very similar to the 21st Street. Option number two, rebidding this project, to me looks a lot like the other example that was brought up, which is the downtown Sims project where they did street work, water main, sewer, and all that. They basically got high bids one year, and they said, those bids are too high, we're going to reject the bids, and we're going to rebid it next year. So they delayed the project by a year, and the bids came in 10% higher. And they virtually didn't change anything on that one because there's nothing to change. It's water main replacement, it's sewer line replacement, and street replacement. So not a lot of value engineering abilities there. Here we would have some value engineering abilities if we rebid it, so it could go down, but the cost of the I-94 tower project is going to be increased a bit. Tim mentioned that. But you also could see bids, if the market conditions are similar to the way they are right now, your bids could be the same or could go up, even in 2 months, middle of the construction season. So again, you've got award the bids and try and get some value engineering to reduce the costs, like was done in the 21st Street project, or rebid and risk delay and possibly the same bid or higher. So we're still recommending award the bid, and we would take that to the council next Monday.
I'm satisfied that the other bidder was unresponsive. I'm also encouraged that we could gain some value via negotiation and working through some of the potentials for this. So I guess I've heard enough. But Steve?
I believe on the 21st Street project, they entered into discussion with the general contractor prior to award to define some of those value engineering items. And I think it's certainly more prudent to do that because it gives the contractor an incentive to be, fair on their pricing. If you award them, they have the contract, and there's maybe less of an incentive to be competitive on some of those things. But that's just from my past experience where we've had to do the same thing. I'm not saying that we haven't, it's always better to do that negotiating on those value engineering prior to award because it's their incentive to get this thing awarded.
Well, then that might be our opportunity to shorten, a 2-month, delay to about 2 weeks if we could go to work on identifying those opportunities. And then, we could be back here in 14 days instead of 60 days, to get the work done and proceed.
And members of the commission, we do have a representative here from Landmark Structures, and he has indicated a willingness to look at those value engineering items. The most significant being some of the foundation items, and also the timeline going forward.
As I said, I'm encouraged by the idea that we could do that. I only speak for me. I'm one of 5, but as we're trying to press forward here and find the right path, I would hate to see us go into 2021. That's way afoul of our plan and our intention, and way afoul of our budgets as we look forward. So, commissioners, what's your pleasure?
Are you going to accept it as the artwork is suggested, or are you going to discuss further?
You bring up an interesting point. Chris did mention in the paperwork as well as in his comments that that was a potential for some savings, but I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other on that artwork. But you others may. Christine, you've been working on that project.
When I look at the numbers, yes, we're way over budget. I'm not sure that the $25,000 for painting really, in the end. And I mean, we did commit last meeting to artwork, and there's been a process, and I would just hate to see that. I think it would alienate people in the community that worked on it. I mean, there are people who don't want artwork, but there are a lot of people who do. So it's a small price for keeping people happy.
Well, and just to clarify, this isn't getting rid of the artwork, it's just going to the smaller version of the artwork.
Option 1, I believe, right? Of the
I don't
artwork.
remember which option it was, but the base bid was for the entire wraparound.
Okay.
And the alternate was just for the smaller version.
Right, the one-sided version.
Yeah, the one-sided version,
Yep,
at a saving
right.
of about $25,000.
Okay.
And the committee they liked or they recommended the wrap.
They did.
So the arts committee.
base bid, that's what they recommended.
Yeah.
So if you award the alternate, you're awarding that simplified version and a deduct of $25,000.
Right.
If you award the base, it's just the wrap.
Yep.
And it's the base bid.
Councilman Gertz.
I think that there should be some input from the council on their wishes, because I served on that art committee, and when you're $1 million over budget, what's 25,000? And not that that's an insurmountable amount of money, but if you put it in perspective, it's. I think the council should be able to weigh in on whether they would like to see the full wrap or not.
Well, we could delay for 2 weeks and work out some of these ideas and problems, as opposed to delaying for 2 months.
It's for 30 days.
Yeah,
What's the date?
we wouldn't make it.
What is the date of the next commission meeting?
What is
Because
our
we
next-
have a bid hold of 30 days.
The next one is
May
proposed to be canceled.
7th?
So yep. That one I believe is proposed to be canceled right now.
Well, golly, maybe we need to have that.
Yeah. Well, I'm fine with that. I'm just, yeah, it is planned to be canceled at this time, but if you.
So our bid opening was the 9th?
Right.
8th or 9th?
Maybe a clarification, Mr. Gertz, what do you think, or what would you propose for the council's input on, option 1 or 2 of the art? Would you like to take this action if the commission approved our recommendation, take that to the council and give them the option of A or B, or the wrap or the partial one? And then are they participating in the cost? I mean, I don't even know if I want to bring that up, but I'm looking at getting the project moving, because any delay hurts us with the value engineering that we're talking about.
Okay, so when were the bids open?
The 8th or the 9th?
The 9th.
9th.
Okay, so I guess we have a representative from the contractor here. You know, if you spent 2 weeks to review value engineering brought back to the commission, the council meets on the 13th. So we're literally
4 days long.
4 days short of that.
Right.
And if they say, no, we aren't going to hold it any further, then I would say rebid it. So, I mean, you could still get to the council approval on the 13th.
This body is meeting on the 7th.
It would, yeah.
Okay.
That's the consensus.
John?
I would have more of a problem with the defensibility of a position that we've negotiated a different contract amount prior to awarding the contract. I think if we're going to do value engineering in this particular instance, it needs to be value engineering after the contract is let, because to do so ahead of time, well, we should give everybody then the chance to bid with new value engineered specs. So I don't know if we want to get into that complication of this situation.
I think we're getting close to a decision. Just like making sausage here.
Yeah, well, and I guess I was looking at, trying to keep the time frame
Yep.
such that we don't waste a month, because when we do award the bid and talk to the manufacturer, they're going to say it would have been nice not to lose that month just to decide on, the artwork. So, I mean, that's where I'm saying, if the commission doesn't have a problem with either artwork, they want some artwork, but they're okay with either one, do you let the council decide which one? And then, there's a $25,000 cost. Maybe the commission's okay with the cost.
Well, again, in the scheme of things, the $25,000 is a pip.
And that's where I was looking for Mr. Gertz to weigh in a little bit on what he thinks the council would look at. Do we want to bring them two options, or do you want to say the commission prefers the wrap? Are you okay with the wrap?
Well, just a consensus sort of indication. Are we more interested in the total wrap? I mean, we have a representative to that project who is preferring that.
I prefer the wrap.
Yeah.
Mary, you're saying yes?
Yeah.
I'll go.
Yeah, because the thought that occurred to me is on which side is the artwork going on, who is not going to see it. Of course, it would face north, as it should.
And there is the option to award with the base bid, and if something happens later on, you just do a deductive change order going back to, the smaller version.
Yeah, well, and John makes a good point. In fact, I think I made the point right back at him at breakfast as we were discussing some of the elements of this thing. Steve makes a good point that well, golly, before you award, it'd be nice to have that conversation going. So I can look right at you and I can say, we need to have a good faith conversation, about what we can do to make this work. If we do approve the contract, so. Well, I only get to sit here and chair the meeting. I can't make a motion, but it seems like we're getting down to somewhat of an idea what we want to do. I'd entertain anything at
All
this
right.
point.
I'll
Make a decision.
I'll toss it out there that I will, I move to approve and award the bid for the Southside Water Tower project. That's my,
Is that everything we need
As recommended.
included? As recommended.
Or
We just need some clarification on the artwork, if you want the base or alternate one. We
There's no
recommended
recommendation to-
alternate one. We recommended alternate one, so we would need to know if you're awarding the base plus the alternate or just the base. So the base is the wrap.
I think just the base, right? Because that's the
that's
wrap.
the full
Yeah.
deal.
Yep.
Right.
So no alternate one.
So your motion includes the base?
the base.
Okay. Everybody understand our motion? I've got a motion and a second. Discussion? We've kind of talked it
We've
through.
beat
but
this one to death.
Steve,
So-
yeah, we
So you're,
pounded on it.
yeah, I don't have a vote, so. Your motion is to proceed
Yep.
with awarding the contract of $3,757,000, no value engineering.
Assuming that it will happen after,
Well, see, that's not part of your motion, though.
Let's add some language.
Your
That's
motion
language.
is to award it full contract.
okay. What,
And direct.
when somebody wanted, and we've moved and we've seconded, now somebody has to come up with a new motion, right?
No, you could have a friendly amendment.
Okay, well, okay.
And direct staff to work with the.
Just one clarification to Steve's number. It's that number plus 25,000. So,
Yeah.
just so we're clear, it's that.
So a friendly motion would be to direct staff to work with the winning bidder on value engineering opportunities.
Right.
Does that work?
I think that would be an appropriate motion, yes.
Susan, how are we doing? You getting it all down? The most important person in the room, right there. Okay, so we're clear on the motion. Any discussion now on any elements thereof? John, you're good?
No. I know where I'm going to vote.
Oh, okay, okay. No discussion? Give you the opportunity. Okay, okay. Mary, you're,
I'm good.
I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
I got a 2-1. I'm going to vote with the ayes on the yes. So 3-1 would be the vote.
Thank you.
Motion is approved.
Like I mentioned, we'll bring this to the council on Monday's meeting.
Keep us in the loop on your conversations about where you're finding savings.
We certainly will. Yep.
Okay. It kind of caught our attention this week. So yeah, Steve.
So is the communication with the other contractor, is that private to just the MPS, or is that available to the commissioners?
That's your question.
As far as I know, the only communication to MPS was that one email that was circulated to everyone.
But your communication with the vendor?
That's my communication with the vendor and not
So that's not public information?
Right.
Okay.
The only thing that got public because it got sent to us was that.
Yeah, the
that
rest of the
element
chain and the trail.
that we did receive, but we've seen nothing since then. And
that was the majority
I
of
would
the.
appreciate not seeing anything further, but
Yeah.
I think that's between you and they. So okay. We are not going to go into executive session tonight. We had planned to have a meeting with our general manager, but one of our members is missing, so I'm exercising my option to eliminate that portion of the meeting. So, is there any further business? I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion, second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second? All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign? Motion is approved. We are adjourned.